Hello, and welcome to the My Life, I'm a Lawyer podcast, where we discuss the shit they told you, the shit they should have told you, and the shit you know now. As always, I make no promises that this may make you rethink some of your life's choices. Today's episode will focus on the shit you know now. With us is our guest, Associate Attorney Byron Chow from Gassman, Bayamonte, and Gruner PC in Garden City, New York. So for many of us, law school is the end goal. But for some, it's definitely not a first choice, maybe not even a third. Sometimes not having a direct path is just another way of finding your direction. During this episode, you'll hear an inspiring conversation on how culture and experiences may shape your direction into your profession. So, first of all, Byron has such a great personality. The thing I noticed first about Byron was Misty. Misty is his beautiful, sweet rescue pup. She's an old soul, as Byron likes to call her, but it's true. She was walking around the firm like she owned that place. I believe we got to talking about our dogs at first, and then, of course, since we worked in the same suite, I got to know Byron, and he is definitely a great attorney, and I'm excited to have you meet him on this episode. So, Byron, thanks for being here. I wanted to find out, who are you now and the firm you practice for? So let me know a little bit about yourself and how you decided to sort of get on this journey.
So I'm at the firm Gassman, Bayamonte, Gruner, which is a matrimonial firm. We do matrimonial and family law here in Garden City. And I've been here now for about 8 years, one of the associate attorneys here. And how did I get here? Actually, it's an interesting story, I suppose, for some people, for me primarily. But before I got into law, I was working at Klein, Lieben & Gresson. And that is a forensic accounting firm in Melville. And the primary work of the firm was to provide litigation and business valuation services for attorneys and judges and litigants that are going through a divorce or some sort of business split. So if you had a divorce and you had, let's say, a restaurant or a bagel shop, or you were a doctor, you owned your own practice, or you owned a multi-million-dollar hedge fund, that would all need to be valued for a divorce. So I started there straight out of college, and I was there for about 8 years.
Wow.
And while I was there, actually 4 years in, I had worked with a lot of the clients, the attorneys, mostly matrimonial attorneys. And at that point, I was thinking, well, I have an undergraduate degree in business, but to stay in this field or to basically advance myself, I needed to have some sort of licensing. All the partners there at Klein, Lieben & Gresson are accountants. They're CPAs. So, at that point I was thinking, okay, I've been here now for 4 years. What should I do as my next step? And I decided, well, I don't know if I really wanted to go for the CPA licensing. And I had met with so many attorneys by then, and I was thinking, you know what? I'd like to see it from their point of view. It was a little less, I thought it would be a little less oppressive at the time, because when you're a forensic accountant, you're working for the judge who then directs the attorneys what to do. And then the attorneys then direct the forensic accountant what to do. And so it's like you're at the bottom of the totem pole and you're getting shat on by everyone pretty much. And you're dealing with the clients and the attorneys and the judges and the courts. So I was thinking, well, you know what, at least if I moved up a little bit in that ladder,
Right.
It might be a little more, I could control certain things. And having seen these attorneys at work, I felt like this is something I can do. I have a really strong grasp of financial forensic accounting and think I can handle the divorce side of it. So I started law school, St. John's, about 4 years into working at KLG. Thankfully, they had an evening program at the time. And so I would work full time, 9 to 5 or 5:30.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, so you were not a full-time student?
No.
Holy shit.
I did evening law school, which, in hindsight, I would probably never do it again.
Right.
Like, I don't know how I survived, because I'm not like that kind of person that's like super. Like, I had friends like that would go out every night and do a lot of activities. And like, for me, I'm perfect for the suburbs because, like, I like it simple. I like it, like, I would go to work at KLG all day and then drive to Queens. And class was usually from like 6:30 until like 10:45 each night, Monday through Friday. And that was, instead of a 3-year program like most law programs, because it's part-time, it's a 4-year program. So I did that. And then after law school, after graduating, I started looking for jobs. And, I did all the typical things that people would do to apply to a job. I applied on the school websites. I did LinkedIn type jobs, anything. But this current position that I'm in now, I got through my former boss. He was at one of the Suffolk County Bar Association event, and he happened to be speaking to Steve Gassman, and Steve mentioned that they are looking for a new associate. Someone had just left, so they need a new associate, and they made that connection. And then the next day, I basically came to the office, I interviewed, and that was basically it. So I did do a lot of job interviews with employers that I found on LinkedIn. And at the time, I was actually considering maybe I would do like trust and estates. So I interviewed in a few of those. I interviewed with some matrimonial attorney firms as well. But ultimately, after that interview with the current firm I'm at, Gassman by Monte-Gruner, I accepted the offer, and I've been here ever since.
Right. The rest is history.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's awesome. So, Byron, you actually you said something interesting. So pretty much the shit you know now is you would not go to law school on a part-time or nighttime program. Not necessarily a part-time program, but a nighttime program, right? Is that the same thing?
So part-time could be also during the day. I know that at the time when I was in law school, this was about, probably like 12 years ago. 11 years ago, it was 2013. When I was going, Hofstra offered a daytime part-time program. So you would pick some classes during the day. I think they also had some classes at night. St. John's program was a little different, where it was part-time, evening only, which worked really well for me. I know Toro also has a program that's part-time, but that's on the weekend, and I believe you would go Sunday all day. Yeah.
That
so
sounds terrible.
all the classes that I would have taken, or you would have taken during the week, you cram it all in one day. Yeah, St. John's really is the only, at the time, I needed a school that was close by. I had a house at the time, I had a mortgage. Like I couldn't just not make money. So I had to work.
Exactly.
And I also had to be able to go to law school.
Right.
And really the drive to go to law school was trying to get some sort of licensing. If it's not the CPA license, I figured I'll get the law license and become an attorney.
Right. So with you saying that now, that if that was your drive, would you say your cultural background comes into play on why you became an attorney? And are there any more attorneys in your family?
There are no attorneys in my family. And that was actually something we discussed. Like after I told my parents that I would go to law school, they were like, oh yeah, I don't think anyone. I think my aunt on my mom's side, she actually went to law school, but she never got licensed as an attorney. And most of our family's in Taiwan. And apparently the pass rate in Taiwan to become an attorney, I think the pass rate's like 16%.
Oh, wow. That's low.
Yeah, so it's like a really, really difficult test. And there's a limit on how many times you can take it. I think that you could take it at most 2 or 3 times before they just say, no, you can't. This is not for you.
Yeah, you're not going to be an attorney. Stop.
And so no, there was no one in the family. And culturally, having practiced now also, I see that there's just not a lot of Asians in law. And I think as Chinese kids growing up, I grew up in Sayasita, and growing up, my parents always did say you kind of have to they're always pushing. They're always worried about what's your future going to be like. Because my parents, especially, they were immigrants. They came in the 80s. They came as master's students. And to them, their idea of success was not only being able to come here, build a life for themselves, but also to make sure that their next generation did well. So, of course, it was always, look, you gotta go to college. You gotta get some sort of professional white collar, as you might call it, job. And so the reason that I went to undergrad and did business was because I really didn't know what I wanted to do but I knew that if I went for a business degree, it would be pretty useful. It would open the doors to doing a lot of different things. And my mom was actually an accountant herself. So I was like, okay. So when I got into the field of forensic accounting, it made sense. It was something I was familiar with. But when I brought up the idea of law, they weren't against it. It was just never something that they considered. And I see that a lot. I think in terms of Asian attorneys in the field now, there's just not a lot. And we're just, I think growing up, you're taught to just do your work. I feel like culturally, Asians or Asian children are taught that you shouldn't be just do what you're told, I think.
Right. Don't be as vocal or
right.
just...
Yeah. So I don't think growing up we were like, when I talk to like friends' kids now, it's like, oh my gosh, they'll talk to me as an adult like as if I were just their friend. But like growing up, that was not the case for us. And I feel like a lot of immigrant families, there's just that hierarchy and you do what you're told.
Right.
And so I don't know if it's like law is the type of field that where you're usually told like, oh, do this, do this, do this. Like where talking and standing up for someone or yourself is something that they would have really considered. But they were really supportive of it once they found out that I wanted to do it. It's funny because it makes me think of a story growing up because my parents have always, my mom especially, she was like the matriarch of the family. So she, from time to time she'd be like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I really never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up.
So she didn't shut it down. Like you never told her like, I want to be blah, blah, blah. And
well, so I don't know if you remember this store called the Museum Store. They had them in the malls.
Yes, I do. In Roosevelt Field, right? There was one in Roosevelt Field?
I think there was one in Roosevelt Field. We usually went to the one in Walt Whitman. And it was kind of like a toy store, but like a science-y toy store. And I remember we would always go to KB Toys and the museum store whenever we were in the mall. And I remember one day, like, when we were leaving the store, I mentioned to my mom, just in passing, I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to work here one day. That way I could play with all this stuff every day. And she got so serious after I said that. And she was like, Byron, it's fine if you want to buy things and come see things here, but you need to aim higher. You don't want to just work in the store.
Right.
So I remember that growing up. So there's always that pressure to do better and get an education, get a good job. And I think that's true for a lot of immigrants.
Yeah, no, I agree with
and
you.
Children of immigrants.
Yeah. So in terms of like representation, the importance of that for the Asian community in the legal field, you believe that the Asian community is not represented to the greatest capacity in terms of numbers?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? If you were to go to Flushing, there's plenty of Asian attorneys there. But I think there is a discrepancy between the population base, let's say, of Nassau County, where there is a huge boom in the Asian population in Manhasset, Roslyn, Syosset, Jericho. And there's a difference between the population and the number of attorneys, I think, that are Asians that I see in court. And so I think, it's just not a job, like I said, that I think a lot of Asians consider for their kids. But also I think, it's as a result, people don't have as much access to, or they're intimidated by the legal process, and maybe they'll just choose not to really engage with it because they can't find someone that they're comfortable speaking with. So it's both. And when I first started going to the Bar Association, the Nassau County Bar Association meetings, I noticed that it's not as diverse as it is now even. And one of the things that in the past year, one of the partners at this firm, she was the past president of the Bar Association, Rosalia Baimonte, and she started the Asian American Attorney section at the Bar Association, and I've been one of the founding members of that committee.
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah, and what we've been really trying to do is to bring more awareness to the Asian attorneys and also to the Asian population that we serve in Nassau County. And so this past year, we put on the first Lunar New Year celebration for the Bar Association. We had an immense turnout. We sold out of tickets. In fact,
crazy.
Initially, when we were planning it, we thought it would be like, okay, it'd be great if like 40, 50 people came. We had over 150 people.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. And we had performers from this performing arts school in Syosset. They volunteered their time. And it really was like a great way for the section, the Asian American Attorney section, and for the Bar Association to showcase that, look, we realize that representation is important and understanding different cultures is important. And it really was a visionary idea by the past president, Rosalia Baimonte, in planning that and setting forth that committee. And I've been working with the co-chair, Jennifer Koo, and I like to plan the event. So we also planned like a calligraphy night for the Asian Heritage Month. So we're looking to bring more of that awareness to the Bar Association. And in so doing, we are also getting ourselves more out there and attending other Asian American events in Nassau County, networking with those individuals, because the population really has changed since I was a kid. Growing up, I was one of 2 Asians on my bus route. In my neighborhood, there was only one other Asian person. And now when you go to like Jericho and Syosset, it is, I think the stats are like it's 1/3 Asian now. Chinese, mostly Chinese people. And I mentor in Jericho Middle School now 2 kids, and they're both Chinese. And so I think the population has changed a lot and the face of the community has changed. And so it's important for the community to know that this is one of those occupations that we should consider, and that doing we can also represent our community. And I'm so thankful. My mom would be so happy to hear, but I probably will never admit it to her face. But like, she forced us to go to Chinese school every Friday growing up, and we hated going to Chinese schools. It's like everyone was like doing fun things Friday night. We were going to Half Hollow Hills for a Chinese school, and it was like 3 hours out of your Friday night.
Yeah, that is a long time.
Yeah, but now I'm fluent in Chinese,
right?
And I've had plenty of clients and cases where I'm dealing with people that don't speak fluently, and it's been very helpful to them in getting that representation that they need and also just feeling more comfortable with whoever's representing them.
Yeah, no, that's really great.
Yeah.
That's really good information, Byron. I didn't know that. Do you remember what the bar exam was like, both studying for it and the waiting period?
Yeah, I can't say I remember every single thing, but there were definitely key memories. And in terms of bar prep, I think the first thing that I remember was I felt lucky because I remember 1L year, Barbary had come to the school and said, oh, you can sign up for Barbary now and you'll save like a ton of money. You'll lock in your price. And when you need to take the bar exam, you'll already have paid, you'll pay like the lower amount. Who thinks of that stuff? Like
definitely not
3
me.
years, 4 years for me. I'm like, I'm not considering this $2,000 investment now.
Right.
So I didn't do it. But my advice to anyone is if that offer comes along, you take that offer your first year or your second year of law school and lock that price in because it is really expensive. I was very lucky because, one of my friends in law school at the time, she had bought the program first year, and she was one of those people that was like really on top of things and was always like, oh, you got to do this. You got to do this. Like if you needed to know, like when something was due, like you ask her and she would know. So she had bought the program first year. But then her boyfriend decided in her 3rd year or 4th year, like, oh, I'm going to gift her a review program, Kaplan's review program. And so she ended up with 2 programs. And she was like, I can't use both. You want to buy Barbary off? Right. I was like, sure. And then she was like, just buy it for however much I paid. I was like, amazing. But now in hindsight, it would be my first.
So the shit you know now is...
Yeah, but, the Barbary prep is expensive. All of them are expensive. They are worth every penny, though.
Absolutely.
They're worth every single penny. And I know there's several levels of the exam prep, but I just had whatever everyone else pretty much had. More than sufficient. So sign up early. Now, I remember when I interviewed here at GBG for my job, I had just graduated and I was just about to start bar prep. So I would say this was like July of 2017. And 3 partners were interviewing me. And Josh, I remember saying to me at the time, whatever you do, just follow the schedule that Barbary sets for you. If it says you need to do this coursework that day, do it. If it says you have to take an exam on Saturday, you do it. Follow that and make sure you do everything and you'll be fine. And that could not be more true. I did every single thing that it asked me to. I think there were certain parts of the exam prep that I felt, I can handle on my own. You have to sort of gauge what you are good at and what you are not so good at for yourself, right? You have to be introspective and analyze like what you can handle and figure it out. But I remember when I first started with the bar prep, they were offering like in-person review classes at Hofstra. And at the time I was living in Huntington, I remember showing up for the first class. It was like a 40-minute drive. And it's all kids from Hofstra. I knew nobody there. And they basically just put on a video on the TV.
Oh, so it was like they were streaming it and you were just watching it in a classroom all
Yeah,
together.
and you were able to sit there with your friends, I guess, if you had gone to Hofstra, and just
That seems distracting, no?
Yeah. Well, so I found that distracting. And also, like, I didn't know anyone. So I realized, like, look, I'm spending, an hour and a half commuting every day. If I were to do this, I could watch this at home and I would be able to accomplish the same thing. Now, the only concern at the time was like, look, would I really sit there and listen to all the videos? And I knew I was going to have to do it, and I knew I would do it. So just because it said to come in and do the class with her, I decided, I'm going to do my own studying. I know in law school, we all studied in groups. I studied in a group. But for this, I felt like, look, I can handle it. I have the videos on the app, and I just did it on my own. The app was really useful. I think the thing that helped me the most was listening to those videos over and over and over again. Anytime I was driving, anytime I was going somewhere, if I just had downtime, I was listening to the videos. So much so that I remember basically memorized some of these videos and even the jokes that the professors are telling. But I think that for me was how I remember things. So just having that playback. And so I found that really helpful. But definitely follow the schedule and just be honest with yourself. Like, what can you handle? What can you not handle? And do what you had to do. I just knew that I did not want to have to take it again.
So you ended up taking the bar exam once?
Yes, I took it once. I took it the July after I graduated. I remember I had studied on my own, like I was saying. And so I don't know how, but I remember the first day of the test, like sitting down for the first part. And I thought it was going to be like multiple choice. And it's like all these...
it's the essays the first day.
It was the essays the first day. And so I opened the book. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. Like, maybe I shouldn't have studied on my own because apparently I didn't even know what was the first part. But there was like, it was like the MPT, MEE. It was like all these initials were confusing. The essays weren't so bad. You sort of, if you know the rule, you do what they tell you to apply, do IRAC, issue, rule, application, and then the conclusion. So you do that for everything. But I remember walking away from the multiple choice day and I said, I don't know if I could tell you if I answered anything
correctly.
Yeah, I thought maybe at most I answered like 2 correctly. I knew for sure.
Was it the commander-in-chief?
Yeah. And then waiting for the bar exam results, there were weeks where I would like remember that the scores were coming out soon and I would just get like a little depressed, like, oh my gosh, I feel like I might have failed. Like, what would I do? I just can't deal with just having to take this over again, to study for it again. The social ramifications of having to talk to everyone about it.
And you had a job on the line, right? Or
yes, I was, I was working at my current firm and everyone was sort of expecting you to pass because until then you were attorney pending admission. Yeah, a job was on the line. And so I remember going through those phases and then other times just forgetting that I had taken it. But yeah, it was, I think in speaking to a lot of people, that was a very common experience. It is a difficult test and you just don't really know how you did until the scores come out. Right.
So in terms of the shit you know now when it comes to having taken the bar exam and waiting, what would you say you would tell people not to do or what to do during the waiting period? Or everybody's different anyway, but just what was the best thing that you found helped you?
I know that a lot of people said, like, don't discuss the test answers. And I don't think you're allowed to technically, but, everyone talks about, oh, what did I write? What did you write? I think the best thing was to just put it out of your mind, right? It's in God's hands now. Absolutely. The test is done. And to the extent that I could, I forgot about it. Just keep on keeping on, right? I worked. I had things that kept my mind off of it.
In terms of starting in matrimonial law, which I don't think you ever thought you would be in, what is the shit you know now about your practice going into matrimonial law, how you handle the clients you have now? Put it to this way. When I first started working for Richard Tannenbaum, I could not I was so emotional. I was taking on everyone else's problems, a lot of the clients. And I became sort of like, oh my God, he did what? She did this? And I remember one day he sat me down in his office and he was like, at the end of the day, this is a business and you are making people happier. So you need to compartmentalize and get this out of your head and just handle the client's issues the way you would in a typical business scenario.
Well, I think the best way to cope is probably just to not get involved in the first place. Just don't do it.
Right.
But I kid. It is a very emotional field. And for me, thankfully, that's usually not so much of a challenge for me. Don't bring this stuff home, right? This is the client's life. Yes, it's terrible a lot of the times what they're dealing with, but that shouldn't reflect on your own personal life. Don't let that affect your personal life to the extent that you can. And it does take some getting used to. I think the challenge for me initially was you meet all different types of people in very difficult situations, circumstances, and some of them are highly successful individuals who run businesses, who have they know what they want, and they try to drive the bus. And as an attorney, not only is it my job and goal to help you and do what you need to get through this, but a lot of the times you need to counsel them to not think things in a certain way or to do things a certain way. And you need to tell them, no, this is what needs to be done. And this is what I think makes most sense in your situation, because otherwise, you'll be constantly trying to please them. And quite frankly, they don't know what it is that they need in their case. Once you see and deal with these cases on a daily basis, you're in the courts on a daily basis, you know what's important. And I'm not trying to say that their concerns are not important, but sometimes what they think is important is not going to be something that is detrimental or absolutely necessary to be dealt with. It might be something that the courts might not find to be so pressing. So yes, you have to address their concerns, but also you have to help them understand, okay, in a divorce case, if one spouse is returning the children 15 minutes later than we've agreed to, is that really something that we need to address?
Right. Is that a breach of the agreement?
Right. And in law, right, there's also the agreement and then trying to hold people accountable to it. And there's a cost to enforcement, and you have to help them see through that. But I think the biggest thing was I was just starting out doing law, so I wasn't necessarily confident in what I thought would be the correct way. And correct way is not necessarily the best way to put it, right? It's the most advantageous, strategic, the most appropriate response for a situation. Because as you see in the bar exam, there could be a bunch of scenarios. Correct answers, but what is the best response? And when you first start out, you can probably identify all the different possible responses that you could take, but what is the most appropriate is harder. So after doing it a little more, you get a sense of it. And so helping to educate the client in that way, to get them to realize that what they insist on might not necessarily be the right way, not letting them drive the bus necessarily. Yes, of course, you want to have them be able to provide input, having them provide what their needs are, but you also need to make sure that you're not just letting them make decisions without being fully informed and doing what you think is in their best interest or in the best interest of their kids a lot of the times.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Can you offer any gems overall from LSAT to getting sworn in? Mm-hmm. What would you say is the shit you know now that is the key takeaway?
The shit that I know now is that you should always know your worth as an individual and as an attorney. When I first started applying for jobs, at that time, I had already worked 8 years in forensic accounting, and I had that knowledge base. And I was applying to matrimonial firms, trust and estates firms. There were other attorneys where they were totally disregarding that. And they treated me as if I was just someone that had
just
any other, as any other law school graduate in terms of what they were offering me to do and what they were offering me as pay. So identifying your strengths and then using that to your abilities and never really underselling yourself, I think is really important. As attorneys, we're constantly advocating for someone else. My advice would be, don't forget to also advocate for yourself. And that's really, really important in my eyes. I found a firm that appreciated and acknowledged the experience and the necessity of this type of experience in specifically the matrimonial field, where we handle a lot of high net worth individuals. And so it was also a bit of luck. It was also knowing your network and being able to use that network. I was very lucky. My old boss, David Gresson, he was just an excellent guy. And sometimes when I think about it, mentors or people that have such an effect on your life, you just never know when they come and when they'll be in your life. And in the field of law, like sometimes with referrals and everything, you just never know when your next referral will also come from. So just always keeping your door open, your mind open, and growing your network, using your network to your advantage is such an important thing, but also to know your worth and to use that to your advantage as well.
That was a nice touch.
It's probably something most people would tell you, right? You are your best advertisement. So the way you hold yourself out as an attorney is really important. And I think you mentioned this in your first podcast, right? Your reputation really is so important. And it's really your word and your reputation that makes or breaks the case in the practice of law. I think that it's important to find and get yourself into a situation, especially when you're just starting out, to get yourself in a situation, in a job, in a mentorship where you find that situation appropriate and fitting for what your personal needs are and what your personal goals are. I think I wasn't ever one to say, oh yeah, I want a mentor, but when I came here, one of the attorneys that was here, one of the more senior attorneys, we got along. And I found that the way he did things, I found really upstanding. He was just a nice person and very knowledgeable, and he was well respected. And I remember always going to him with my questions. And so finding that resource, because when you're just starting out, you really are learning. You're developing your skills as an attorney. You're developing your style, right? Every attorney, some of them are difficult. Some of them are more amicable. And there's ones that you'll like. There's ones that you won't like. What kind of attorney do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to portray to the community? And it is really a small community. I remember they would say that to you, and I'd be like, how's that even possible? There's like 1 million attorneys. Right. We're in New York. There's so many.
It's such a small, I guess it's just as big as the profession is.
Yeah.
It's everybody knows everybody through someone.
Yeah. And people know people. And so, it really is important to find yourself a good base, find yourself a good team, find, and emulate what you think is a good and ethical and effective, what kind of firm or person would help you figure that out. And I think I'm really glad with my firm, people took the time to explain things when you needed to work. If there were issues, that they would sit and explain and go over things with you. I never felt like I was being thrown into the deep end on something. Yes, of course, there were times where I was sent to family court. I was like, I don't really know. I've never, dealt with family court really. Yeah. But, that's normal to any job. But I always felt prepared because whoever I spoke with would give me an idea. I was involved in things. And that's kind of why I also like being a part of a smaller firm, because what you do on a daily basis, it has an effect on the case, right? I'm not just sitting around doing one specific task. I'm handling cases from the beginning to the end. And so, finding a good team, finding a good mentor, and just identifying what is it that I want out of this profession. I think in the realm of family law especially, right, where we're dealing with family dynamics, I think it's important for us to also be mindful of our own families. And I know that, especially with the older generation of attorneys, the job was your life, right? And I think it's important for us to set an example for our clients that, look, yes, cases are important, but so is our families. And I set my boundaries with the clients, and I think it's something that they also need to then emulate for themselves. Like, your family should come first, always. That's something I put a lot of priority on, and I think it's something that we should set as an example for those that we deal with on a daily basis.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's really great. Thanks, Byron. Byron, wait, you are Chinese.
Yeah.
But you mention Taiwan?
Yeah, so, if you give me the time, I'll go through like the whole
family tree,
like the political, the drama between China and Taiwan. So, but the short story is basically, a lot of the Taiwanese people are ethnically Chinese. So, like, my dad's side of the family, they fled China during the Cultural Revolution when Mao got into power. So they fled to Taiwan. So, but my mom's side, from what I understand, they were more like native Taiwanese people. So ethnically, we're all Chinese, but depending on who you ask, some people identify more as Chinese or Taiwanese. I don't really have a preference either way. For me, Taiwan really is home. That's where all of my family is. But I understand that China is where parts of the family did come from. And I know, like, for my dad, who grew up, I think his first 10 years he lived in China. Like, for him, he has a connection with that. So, they're all in Taiwan now. And actually, my brother lives there now full time. Yeah.
Wow.
I thought I would be, if anyone, because I was born here. But then right after I was born, I went back to Taiwan. So I lived my first 5-6 years in Taiwan before I came back to the U.S. to start first grade. So for me, Taiwan has a special place in my heart. I love the food. Like, anytime I go back, it's just like, it's the best. I just eat my way through the entire visit.
I bet. So that schooling in Half Hollow Hills was good then, right? Was necessary to some degree?
Yeah. I think so. Yes, absolutely. So Taiwanese. I also do speak Taiwanese, but everyone will speak the main dialect, which is Mandarin Chinese. So I speak Mandarin Chinese, and to the extent that someone needs someone to speak Taiwanese, I can also speak that. But it's a much smaller subset of the population of Chinese people that would actually speak that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Byron.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. Okay, everyone. So that was Byron Chow. Byron's coming to us from Nassau County, Garden City, Gassman, Bayamonte, Gruner. As always, check out the Fuck My Life, I'm a Lawyer podcast right here or anywhere you find your podcast, where episodes drop on Wednesdays. Because what's better than a little midweek fuckery? Remember, we're cool legal, not uptight.